Next on the docket, judging the judges. The Senate approved 12 appeals court judges last year, a record for the first year of a presidency, but quantity a lot different than quality. Several, they didn't make the cut, and that includes this man, Matthew Peterson. He wound up withdrawing his nomination after this embarrassing exchange and appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Have you ever tried a jury trial?
I have not.
Civil?
No.
Criminal?
No.
Bench?
No.
State or federal court?
I have not.
Do you know what a motion in limine is?
Yes, I haven't. Again, my background is not in litigation.
And it went on and on. Peterson, one of 3 nominees to drop out or get dropped late last year. And by the way, the grilling was from a Republican on that committee. Now, one of them also is this guy, Talley. He's only 36, never tried a case, plus he failed to disclose that his wife works in the White House counsel's office. Oops. The American Bar Association rated him unqualified. This man, Jeff Mateer, he was also pulled, the president's pick, for the Texas bench. He has quite a history. Here are some of his greatest hits from his time as the assistant AG in Texas. He said, and I'm quoting, same-sex marriage would lead to polygamy and bestiality. He also supports gay conversion therapy, and he said transgender children are all part of, quote, Satan's plan. Then there's this man, Leonard Stephen Grass. He is called the Roe v. Wade abortion ruling, quote-unquote, moral bankruptcy, and he said same-sex marriage poses a, quote, grave danger to America. Also, the American Bar Association rated him as, tell me if this sounds familiar, unqualified. But apparently, he is qualified for the 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals because the Senate just approved him in a party line vote. Now, all these issues, plus a stunning lack of diversity, have caused former U.S. court judge Shira Scheindlin to write a scathing piece in the Guardian, and I want to read a portion of it. Although white males make up only 31% of the U.S. population, they account for approximately 80% of the president's picks. People trust their courts when the judges reflect the makeup of the population they serve. But it is not just the gender and the racial makeup of Trump's appointments that merit scrutiny. There are other reasons for concern. The judges go on to point out that of the 60 picks for the federal bench, only 11 have been women, 1 have been African American, and only 1 a Hispanic. The rest, as you guessed, all white males. The judge is kind enough to join us right now. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there's 2 big parts, but what concerns you the most? The lack of diversity or the lack of qualifications for some of these people that could be getting such significant appointments?
Well, in fairness, I have to be more concerned about lack of qualifications because the courts are too important to appoint people who are not qualified to do the job. So that has to be paramount, being qualified. As far as lack of diversity, it's terribly important also. But maybe the president heard the message because he made 10 new appointments, December 20th and 21st, and those 10 are 50% female. That was interesting. That was just 2 weeks ago. Mind you, 9 of those 10 were for the district court. Only 1 was for the Circuit Court of Appeals, and that, as usual, was a white male.
Judge, you know, when people hear the American Bar Association, to many it's just an acronym, but when they rate someone unqualified and the idea that they're going to get a federal benchship, that's significant, isn't it?
It's very significant. The American Bar Association is strictly nonpartisan. It does its rankings through peer reviews. It's very careful. As a judge, I received a call many times about potential new nominees. Prominent lawyers receive calls, judges receive calls. They're very carefully vetted, and they're definitely not partisan. To get a non-qualified rating is very, very rare. And this president has already had 4 of his picks rated not qualified, which is also a record. And the fact that one of those has already been confirmed, as you pointed out, for the circuit court is really troubling.
You know, you mentioned the lack of diversity, but I saw a little item in the Times I wanted to get your reaction to. And this one involves women on not just the bench, but on the Supreme Court. There was a study that showed that of the female justices, they are interrupted by the male justices at a very high rate. of more than 7,000 interruptions, a third of the time it's the woman on the bench that's getting cut off, and they only do the interrupting 4% of the time, and they don't get as much airtime, if you will, as their male counterparts. I'm curious, you think this is an anomaly, or have you seen this yourself in the lifetime that you spent on the bench?
I don't think it's an anomaly, and I saw that same study, and what I thought was interesting about it is even the lawyers arguing before the court were more likely to cut off a female justice's question than a male justice. So it seems that we have a gender equality issue here. Women, in general, simply don't get the same respect as men. Now, you're seeing that play out in all of the sexual harassment issues that have been arising in the press in the last 3 months. And I'm not calling this harassment, but there's a certain lack of respect to think that one's own colleague would interrupt you constantly in the middle of a question, and to think that a lawyer who is told and trained never interrupt a justice. As soon as a justice speaks, you stop speaking. And yet they go right ahead and interrupt women. And let me tell you, these are strong women. I know all three of them. They're not likely to take it lightly, and yet it goes on. So it tells you something, I think, about disrespect.
Well, you said it to me. The idea that, first of all, if you're going to cut off any justice, but I imagine somebody giving lip to Sotomayor kind of at least took me aback. But to that end, how do we change it? What has to happen?
Well, that's a really good question. How do we change so many things in our society where women are not treated equally as men and women are disrespected? How do we change that all around? We're thinking about that every day now, as I said before, in the sexual harassment context. And the answer seems to be more education, more training, more sensitivity, more discussion of implicit bias. People have to think about those issues, and I think everyone is thinking about them now. New York is certainly doing more training now on implicit bias. I'm sure other state legal associations are doing it. Corporations are doing it. Government is doing it. Chief Justice Roberts even brought it up in his year-end talk on the federal judiciary where harassment has happened. It has to stop. So I think all institutions and entities are very, very sensitized now and are really trying to change things.
And finally, Judge,
generationally.
Yeah, and hopefully that is the case. I'd be remiss if I didn't get into stop and frisk with you. New York City just wrapped up the year with record low crime rates. Homicides fell below 300 for the first time since the NYPD started collecting the stats. Compare that to the high when you go back to 1990 during the crack epidemic, when more than 2,000 people were murdered, as a point of reference. Now, just about every category saw a drop compared to 2016. Felonies declined by 6%, and all of that happened despite the winding down of the aforementioned policy of stop and frisk. Many said doing away with that tactic would spike the crime rate, but no. And of all places, the National Review, conservative magazine, they even wrote, I thought, a pretty powerful op-ed piece called "We Were Wrong About Stop and Frisk." Now, you, as many people know, made that critical ruling on that policy. Are even you surprised in such a short window that all the fears that it turned out that this was going to lead back to the old days, the bad old days, never came to fruition? Are you surprised by the actual data in a short window of time?
No, I'm not surprised at all, and I certainly appreciated all the apologies that I've been getting, directly or indirectly. But I'm not surprised because the tactic was a failure. Most of those stops were what we call dry stops. Nothing was found. They really were simply harassing the minority community, and that's not a good thing because then the community doesn't work with the police to make things better. They distrust the police, and I heard people say, I wouldn't talk to a policeman if I saw a crime in progress. So now things are better. The stops dropped by 98%. As you point out, crime didn't rise, and we're getting better policing, better cooperation between the community and the police. So I wasn't surprised because I knew the data on those stops. And frankly, I never thought it was an effective tool, and I thought it was really discriminatory in practice.
Finally, Judge, and you don't have to name names if you don't want to, did any of the apologies you get come from Police Plaza?
No, I don't think so. I was really talking about the media.
Sure.
There were several. I mean, I know that the National Review did it, but the Daily News did it, the Post did it. A lot of press has come around and said we were wrong, and so that's very satisfying because I was confident that, in fact, I was right.
Well, Your Honor, I certainly appreciate the time here, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation that you helped start here, not just on that policy, but also as it relates to diversity on the bench and some of the stunning folks that have been put up for some of those federal positions. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Coming up next, everybody, Governor Cuomo today focused on criminal justice reform during his State of the State address. We're going to show you what he had to say and also debate the merits about what he wants to do.